Welcome to GMT. I'm George Alagaya with a world of news and opinion. Also in the programme, Syrians take to the streets after Russia and China block a UN resolution to condemn the crackdown on protesters. Now, on the streets of Syria, protesters have been showing their anger at the Russian and Chinese veto to a UN resolution targeting Bashar al-Assad's regime. Demonstrators chanted anti-Russia slogans and said they'd support protests until death. Tuesday's vote exposed the deep divisions within the UN Security Council. The Western-backed resolution would have criticised Syria's government for using force against its own people. The veto provoked a furious reaction from the American ambassador, Susan Rice.
The United States is outraged that this council has utterly failed to address an urgent moral challenge and a growing threat to regional peace and security.
And later, during his speech, the Syrian ambassador severely criticised the United States, leading to this reaction, a rare walkout. You can see her there, Susan Rice, by the American delegation, taking her team out of the hall. Well, human rights groups have been highly critical that the Security Council failed to reach a resolution 8 months into the protests. Now, to talk about the ongoing uprising and international reaction, I'm joined by Saka Al-Makhadhi, Syria analyst, and thank you for being with us
Good afternoon,
today. We saw that, those pictures from the United Nations. What's your reaction to this Russian and Chinese veto?
Well, this is an international power play. It's got less to do with what's going on in Syria and more to do with the international relations between Russia and China and the US. Of course, in the last few days, the opposition has finally managed to form a kind of umbrella group. They're calling it the Syrian National Council. And that's really important because finally the international community now has an address where they can go to if they need to talk to the Syrian opposition. Before this, the opposition groups have been very fragmented. They tried to gather in Istanbul, in London, in Paris, but they'd been divided and fractured.
You're right. As you say, they're calling themselves the Syrian National Council, but is it as united as it sounds?
There are many divisions. It comprises a lot of different groups. So you've got religious groups like the Syrian Muslim Brotherhood. You've got the old school politicians like the Damascus Declaration, which have been working tirelessly for years. Many of their members have been jailed by the regime of Bashar al-Assad. And then you've got the local activists, the local coordination committees. These are the people on the ground in Syria. So you've got these expats and the people in Syria who are now working together. They've managed to agree on a few things. One of them is that they're working for the overthrow of the president. But they are still divided on a number of issues, namely the most important of which is whether to militarize the uprising or not.
Well, that's the key. I was going to get on to that, actually, because this has echoes, of course, of what happened in Libya, where it was very much a military operation, and then NATO came in on the back of that. So where do you think the argument lies then?
The difficulty is, at the moment, for the last 6 months, the leaders of the uprising, people who have been speaking to the media, have been insisting that the uprising will remain peaceful. And they've managed to keep their word on that up till now. The Syrian National Council is sticking by this line that they want to remain peaceful. Some protesters on the ground are holding banners calling for NATO intervention, for international military intervention. And so you've got this divide between the opposition leaders and the street. Now, they're really caught in a catch-22 situation, aren't they, this Syrian National Council? If they call for the militarization of the uprising, if they call for the revolutionaries to take arms and for NATO to intervene, then they're playing into the regime's hands, because the regime has accused the entire uprising of being armed, of receiving funding and weapons from abroad. Well, they're calling them terrorists and so on, aren't they? Exactly, and they've been happy to paint the uprising in this way. And if the uprising takes up arms, then they'll be playing into their hands. The problem is, if they don't, if they reject this call for arms, then they're going to move further away from the street and lose that legitimacy that they've got.
All right, Saka Al-Makhadhi, thank you very much. Thank you for your time.